Oh, you guys again. Is it really Sunday already? What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Age Panel. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and this is the show where we bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I don't want to rant too long in this introduction because this is by far my longest episode, so I'm just going to get right into it. Before I explain who my next guest is, if you're watching this, first of all, I appreciate you. Second of all, please like, comment, subscribe, give 5 stars, whatever platform you're using. Please show some support. It means the absolute world to me. And if you can, share it with your friends. Maybe someone in your friend group needs to hear this. Just share it to them. Let's keep this conversation going. I appreciate everything. So for this episode, I have Dai Manuel on as my next guest. Dai is an award-winning digital thought leader and an author who works as a lifestyle business mentor and a high-performance life coach. He aims to positively impact future role models across the world through the 3 pillars that he focuses on: education, encouragement, and community. He was an absolute pleasure to talk to, and his energy bursted through the screen. And he's got a ton of stories that he shares in this episode that I find will be very valuable for a lot of you listeners. And shout out to him for really coming on and agreeing to have this discussion with me. Without further ado, here's the episode, guys. I hope you enjoy, and I'll talk to you soon. I'm Harry Potvin, and this is the H Panel.
Harry,
How's it going?
excellent. How you doing?
Not bad, not bad. How are
Sorry, I'm a few
things?
minutes late.
Oh, that's okay. That's all good. How are things out west?
Things are great. The sun's out today, man. It's like, and anytime the sun's out, it's a good day in Vancouver.
Yeah, no kidding.
So yeah, it's like the first. I mean, it's been raining like for a week straight, so it's actually a big deal. I can see the sky, so yeah, it's pretty nice right now.
What a treat! What a treat!
It
How are
really is. It really is.
how
Mhm.
are COVID things over there?
Not so bad. I mean, the Bonnie Henry, who's for BC, her and Adrian Dix, they keep throwing down more restrictions as we head into the holidays. That's been happening for the last 4 weeks,
Mm.
and I get it. They're trying to dissuade people from being overly social or traveling during the Christmas break. I get it. So that's definitely put a bit of a damper in some people's spirits, so to speak. But overall, I'd say it's pretty positive. I mean, BC's done a pretty good job up until, I guess, October when we started seeing some spikes. But it's Vancouver. I mean, I can't complain. It's great. I love it here. But like anywhere, we're all dealing with it, right? So,
Hmm.
but they're dealing with it well. So kudos to them.
Yeah, that's good to hear, man. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we're about to start well, it's rumored, but I think we're gonna go through with it. We're gonna start our second lockdown in like
Oh, jeez.
next week or the week after.
Crazy.
Like you said, just through the holidays.
Yeah. Yeah.
So back to YouTube workouts and
Yeah.
trying to figure out what to stay busy with.
No doubt. Well, it's kind of nice though from that standpoint. I mean, I remember when they first had the lockdown and yeah, my wife and I, we were actually kind of excited because we had all these projects we wanted to work on. We were like, oh, when are we going to figure out the time? And then the lockdown happened. We're like, well, I guess we got the time. It was like, all right, well, so we stopped focusing on things that we couldn't do and you just started looking at, well, what can we do? Right. And there's plenty of options anyways when we find ourselves stuck at home, but it can be frustrating at times.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's a great way to look at it, though.
Yeah.
So before we get into it, thank you again
Sure.
for agreeing to do this with me.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's great. I'm excited.
So you have such an interesting story and a past that can definitely help a lot of people, especially viewers of this show.
Mm,
So I wanted to go all the way back to your life with addiction.
mm,
And you've mentioned on your website that this life free of addiction needs to start with a choice.
mm,
So, what is your story with addiction, and what
mm.
was this choice that kind of caused you to shift? Like, what did it feel or look like?
Well, Harry, to sort of give you a little bit of background, and even when I realize language is so important, right? I mean, it's
Mm,
how we communicate, it's how we understand things. It's usually through the words, especially that we choose. And when I use the term addiction, I do want to let people know that what I used to believe was addiction was more the stereotypical understanding of what addiction is, right? It's this idea that we cannot control ourselves from doing that thing, and often it's a thing that we often will deem as being a negative, right? Maybe negative health benefits, financial benefits. Like it affects us, our overall well-being. Let's just put it
Mhm.
that way. When I really started to dive into this and really look at my own habits that I would tend to do over and over again, it really came down to a value. Like I would value those things over my life at the time.
Mm.
So what I mean by this is, like especially with alcohol and narcotics, it, I was always fully aware of what I was doing. I was aware of it, and I chose to go and use that versus valuing the things that were most important to me, the things that I already had in my life, like my family, my relationship with my wife, my businesses. Like I was choosing to value that in the moment, you know, as a form of escape, for sure. Escaping the stress, the anxiety, the overwhelm, sometimes the depression, just being dissatisfied with where I was in life and thinking that I should be somewhere else, and dealing with that emotional baggage. It was my way of just like, well, I can deal with it right now in the moment, have a few drinks, and it'll put things off till tomorrow. I'll worry about that stuff tomorrow.
Mhm.
So it was like a little escape, right? But when that becomes the regular, like an
Right.
everyday sort of thing, or multiple times a week, and I choose to continue to value that over my relationship and the things that were real in my life, well, there was a lot of negative repercussions. And not only for me personally, but also just for some of my closest relationships. And just to put this into sort of a linear timeline, when I was 14, I was morbidly obese, and I didn't get there by accident, right? Like from the age of 9 to 14, I learned to cope with a lot of emotional stress and anxiety with food, and video games, like instant dopamine hits, right? Like it made me feel better in the moment.
Mhm.
And so I would do it, and I would do it often. And I wasn't exercising, I wasn't moving my body very much. And so over time, those things compounded not in a very positive way. In fact, I gained a lot of weight and became quite obese, and that had a whole lot of other baggage with it. But that was my first experience of learning to cope with stress, anxiety, pain, depression, but using something outside of myself to deal with it. And so I went through some changes at 15, and I had one of those moments where I broke down and became very fearful. I was afraid of the idea of taking my life. Like as much as I thought about it, I thought, oh, life would just be a lot easier if I just wasn't here. Because
Mhm.
I was depressed, I was sad, I was dealing with all those negative emotions that are attached with someone that might be living in that state of unhealth. Like we are very quick to judge ourselves, and especially as a teenage boy with hormones running and being in that state, my emotions were running really high,
Yeah.
and um, I got to that point where I was really afraid of that idea of the finality, and then I was like, okay, well, that's not going to happen because one, I really don't see that as an out. I knew it would cause a lot of pain to my family and those that love me, and so that okay, we'll get rid of that option. So what are my other options? What do I got left? Right? I know I'm not happy. Well, I could continue to do the things I'm doing. Right? Keep living life as I am without making any changes. But I have to be honest with myself. Where do I see myself by the time I'm 20? And getting honest with myself, I was like, it's not going to be any better than it is now. And matter of fact, I know it will probably be a lot worse than it is now.
Mhm.
And then I was like, okay, well, what's my other option? Well, my other option is, well, maybe figuring out a way of doing things differently. Maybe there's a way to get healthy, to get fit, to not be obese, to be healthier. Like maybe there's an option there. So it's like almost like a fork in the road, right? I'm like, I could go that way or I could go this way. And it really came down, Harry, to the path that I was least intimidated by. I was more afraid of staying as I was, expecting life to get better without doing anything about it, than I was of the idea of, well, okay, maybe I'm just going to go and learn a different way of living my life. And so what did I do? Well, I chose that path. the path that I was less afraid of. And I went to the library. I got books out on fitness and nutrition, and my kids laugh, right? They're like, "Dad, why don't you just Google it?" I'm like, "I'm older than Google, like,
Yeah.
that's what you get, like I'm an old guy." And so I learned, and I was very fortunate that my parents were also very supportive. They tried to help me so many times before, but every time they would offer to help, I took it as a personal attack. I was like, "Oh, you're just saying that because I'm fat. You think I'm ugly. You think I need to change. You want me to change. Well, I don't want to change. So I would see it as, and I would push them away. I would act out, and I would do more of those things to now
Mhm.
cope with that. It was crazy, right? When I think back on it, I'm like, man, why was I doing that? And it's just in our nature sometimes. We just these conditioned responses to stress, and so I found a healthier way of dealing with the stress. And my parents were like, whoa, they could tell I was actually motivated, my self motivation to want to make some changes. So they supported me. They got me a mountain bike, and I started biking. And after about 20 months, I released the weight. I started working out. I found people to support me and teach me a little bit on how to exercise, how to eat a little bit better. And it wasn't rocket science, but I had to commit to a process, and do it regularly. And I started seeing results fairly quickly. Like a month in, I started noticing things. My pants were looser. I started feeling better. I wasn't wheezing the stairs anymore. I could tie my shoes, like without having to try to jimmy my feet up in a certain way. Like I started noticing these positive changes. And I was like, wow, this works. I'll just keep doing it. And in fact, I got more excited. So I started doing it a little bit more. And 20 months later, I released the weight. And the weirdest thing happened, Harry, friends of my parents and friends that knew me and saw me go through this big transformation, they started asking me questions about fitness and nutrition and how to work out and what I was doing. And I never had that experience before. Up until that point, I'd be the guy in the room no one would talk to. Now all of a sudden, people wanted to
Mhm.
talk to me. They wanted to actually my help. I was like, whoa, this is different. I really like this. I can help people. And so that was my first taste of coaching and mentorship. And it got me really excited, and that put me on a path of just wanting to help people. And problem is, Harry, at 18 years old, now in this sort of idea of like, I'm going to help people with their fitness and their well being and all this stuff. But I really went the fitness route, which is very much on the surface, right?
Mhm.
And I was very geared towards the surface because honestly, my motivation at 15 years old is I wanted a girlfriend. Right?
Of
I
course.
was like, I want a girlfriend. I want a girl to want me. And my psychologist back in the day when I went through some coaching and counseling, and there's some underlying trauma there that was needing to be itched. Just that desire to want to be loved, and I get that. And to be honest, I was very good at dealing with stuff on the surface. I hadn't done any internal work, and I carried that into my 20s. And then, as I got into a career and started having a family, I still hadn't done any of that inner work. And instead, I learned a new way of coping with the stress and the anxiety in my life. Not now with food and drink and whatnot. Or sorry, I shouldn't say with food and video games because I moved past that. But now it was alcohol, drugs, going out, hanging out with people that weren't my wife. Like doing things that were completely different and way outside of my character, which affected me internally again. And that was a habit that I maintained for a number of years up until my early 30s. And that's when I realized, dude, I can't do this anymore. My wife was going to leave me.
Mm.
Literally, she was going to leave me. She sat me down one day, and I could tell it was like after a night of being out, and just drinking my face off. And I don't remember how I got home that night. And I wish I could say to you, Harry, that yeah, it was a one-off. That only happened one time. No, no, there was a reason why my wife was pissed off and like ready to call it a day because she just wasn't going to put up with it anymore. Both my girls were under the age of 6 at the time. They were 4 and almost 6. And my wife's like, this is no environment to raise kids in. You're a great man, Di. I see so much potential in you. That's who I fell in love with, but you're not living into that, man. And she asked me a question. And I mean, this is the question that changed everything. Like literally changed everything. It's almost 11 years to the day. Next month will be 11 years to the day. Di, are you being the type of man that you want your daughters to marry?
Oh, that's a hard hitting one.
Dude, is it not? Like, I know. It was like getting punched in the nose and kicked in the, at the same time, right? Like, it was like, ooh, double whammy. And I froze. I didn't know how to respond. I was just like, I didn't have an answer because I knew the answer that I would give if I was going to be 100% honest was I wasn't that guy. There's no way I would allow a guy like me at that time come in and get anywhere near my daughters.
Mhm.
Yet that's who I was role modeling. That's who their first impression of what a man was: a father, a husband, a brother, a friend, an owner, like an entrepreneur. Like I was that first male figure, their first superhero, if you will. And I was not being that guy, and so it was right then and there. I made a commitment. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to stop valuing these choices and I'm going to start to value my family, value my relationship with them, value my relationship with myself. And so I took the alcohol and drugs out of the equation. But the crazy thing you take the crutches away because that's how I was functioning. That was my mental health release, if you will. But a lot of people that are mental health advocates say, "Well, I was doing the opposite of trying to," but trust me, it provided me just enough relief so I could function in life.
Mhm.
You take that away, and it's like, oh my gosh, I got a pretty gnarly limp here. What am I going to do? How do
Yeah.
I learn to walk again?
Right.
And I committed. It was just a 1 year commitment to my wife. And it was actually to myself, but I also let it be known to my wife, and my kids that day. It was like, Daddy's going to go 1 year, no drinking, and my kids, they had to say, well, you mean like no pop, no juice? Like to them, they're just like, no drinks. Like, and I'm like, no, the adult drinks, the no drinks for you guys. And they're like, oh, okay, okay. But it was a 1 year commitment. And I realized pretty quick that I couldn't do it on my own. And so I sought out some support. I did start working with a psychologist to really start diving into some of the inner work that I had never done. I was very good at just avoiding anything that made me feel uncomfortable, you know, and so that opened up a lot of awareness of me and some of the things that I'd been harboring and not dealing with. And I worked with a relationship counselor to try to improve my relationship with my wife, and then I really started to focus on my health, my own well-being, and starting to create new habits. And what the crazy thing was is one, I started saving a boatload of money,
Mm,
you know,
I
but
bet.
also the time and energy. So I had this year to just like, I'm just gonna try to living into the person that I want my daughters to marry one day. If they could, I want to be that role model. I want to set the bar high and show them what's possible. You know, and that just started, and it's now been 11 years. I'm just doing that. Like it became a lifestyle.
Mhm.
And I mean, I believe I'll never make it to the finish line, if you know what I mean. Like I'm always a work in progress, and trust me, I've got a lot to work on. But it's a work in progress, and I'm grateful that it's my life. So that I know that's a long answer to your very short question, but that is sort of my foray into that. And obviously, people that battle with addiction, I understand. I empathize with it so much. But the cool thing is, we all have the same ability to choose a different path. It may not be easy, but it's always worth it. And I think often the harder we struggle to reach those higher peaks, so to speak, we appreciate the view so much more once we're there
Mm,
because we know how much work it took to get there. But it's always worth it, and so yeah, I'm aware of the struggle with the juggle. I get it. I think we all have that too. But it's been one hell of a journey. These last 11 years, I've grown more than I probably grew in the previous 30, and
mhm,
only because I took away the filters, so to speak, so I could see things a bit more clearly and get clarity. I always tell people, like you need clarity because with clarity comes confidence. And once you have confidence, it's a lot easier to take the actions that you ought to be taken, but maybe you've been putting off. And so it's clarity to confidence to action. And I just wash, rinse, repeat. So
right.
yeah. Sorry, man. I get off on a tangent here and I end up talking the whole time. Sorry about
What?
that.
No, that was great, that
Yeah.
was great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, the filters, sometimes you don't even know you have filters on.
You're
Like,
so true.
people, like, point them out, and you're like, "What? I don't do that." And then, like, once you pull them away, like you said, the crutches are gone, you're like, "Oh, shit."
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and we all have them, right? Like,
Mhm,
listen, nobody's perfect, and I'm not saying to attain. I'm not going to shoot for perfection. I used to. Back in my 20s, I was like, "This is what my perfect life's going to look like." I'll be married, I'll have a house, I'll have a couple kids, dog, like cars. Like just I was very good at quantifying what I expected my life to look like,
mhm,
and chasing what I believe to be success. And I realized the more I was chasing it, the further away it got. I never felt like I was getting closer. So I'm always feeling dissatisfied and ultimately feeling like a failure. I'm like, why can't I do this? Like 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. I'm like, I'm not seeing the progress. And I realized it was just like I'm chasing this idea, but why did I even want the idea to begin with? And I realized it was just what I believed everybody was looking for. I thought that was it. This is what you want. You want lots of money in the bank. You want all these things, and that's what it means to have a great life, to be successful. And I had to really sit with that and start asking myself, well, why? Like, why do I believe that? Like, where did that even come from?
Hmm.
This desire to have all these things and to be pursuing this. And I started to realize it's like, man, that's not actually what's important to me. And we start thinking about our values, core values. Like what do we truly value above all else in our lives? Like what's a non-negotiable for us? And I'd never really gone through the exercise of defining that for myself. And so that was part of the process, after I took away the alcohol and no more drugs and really started to work on me to try to be the best person I could, or at least the best version of me. I realized I had a lot more questions than answers. And so I just started asking questions and trying to discover the answers as I went. And please, anybody that's listening or watching this, like I know it sounds like a great idea and it sounds simple to say it, but it takes effort,
Oh yeah.
and it's, I think it's very worthwhile. But in my experience, I found that I could always figure out ways to procrastinate around that exercise.
Right.
Like I just, as much as I wanted to do it, I would still put it off, and so that's something I've always been trying to work with is like, why do we like to put things off that we know will provide us so much more clarity, in our lives, as well as help us be more connected with our own lives. And yet we put off these things. Like, why? Like, it's wild, right? When you start to really think about it and you look at your own habits, it's like, well, why do I keep doing these other things when I know it's not good for me? I know it's making things harder, yet I keep doing it. Like it baffles me at times, And so it's always one of those things that even working with clients, I'm always trying to help them and support them. And at the end of the day, we still got to support ourselves, right? And it's like,
Hmm.
when do we draw the line and say, okay, enough's enough, man? Like, no, I'm not doing that anymore. And it's weird. I don't think there's a very clear answer because we're all so different, right? And so yeah, life is a funny thing, man.
Sometimes you wonder, like, is my brain going against me? Like like in school when I'd be taking exams, it'd be like, okay, you need to pass this exam to pass like
Mm,
the semester. You need it, and I'd be like,
right.
oh, but what's on YouTube tonight? Your
Yeah.
exam's tomorrow, but oh, what's on Netflix? Like,
Yeah.
why am I thinking that? It's the same thing. You find all these distractions and things that'll
Mm,
either keep you in place or push it back a little because and you
that's right.
yearn for them. You're like, oh, look, chocolate. Or like,
Exactly.
oh man.
Yeah. It's true, right? And it's and I think it's kind of funny because we're coming up to the new year, right? And I know this is that time of year where people start thinking, oh, resolutions. I'm going to
Mhm.
resolve to do this next year. With my new year, this is what I'm going to do. And we prop ourselves up, with all these big expectations without really thinking about what we need to do and do regularly to actually achieve the result. And we start soon realize, wow, this is going to be a lot of work, and it's
Yeah.
like, and once you realize it's a lot of work, it's life gets in the way, right? Like anything, we know that habits are formed by that which we do regularly. Like there's usually some sort of stimulus which causes an action. They call it a trigger, creates an action, and then there's a result from the action. And so it's recognizing the triggers so we can either remove ourselves from them. Like initially for me, it was like, especially giving up alcohol and that, like my spheres of influence, my friends at the time, uh, you know, when I wasn't drinking, it's like I could go out with them, but as they would continue drinking, they would realize that carrying a conversation with me because I really desired deeper conversation, better connection,
Hmm.
and I realized all my connections were very, at least in that circle, were very surface. I
Right.
never got very deep in the conversation because we just never allowed ourselves to. We just drink and talk about sports, talk about the Canucks. We just talk about our golf game. Like it was just really not very deep. None of us talked about any of the real challenges that we were working through. Instead, we just masked them very well. And my phone just stopped ringing. I wouldn't, and to be honest, I didn't miss it because I was like, I don't really get any value from this.
Hmm.
And I don't feel like I'm bringing any value to this either. And once that starts happening, you start questioning things, right? It's like, wow, geez. And so it's seeking out where can we discover a purpose, right? Like that was what I ultimately found was I needed to reconnect with my purpose. Like what is it I really, how do I want to make a mark on this world? And who do I want to be? And to be that person, what do I need to do and do consistently? And so you recognize certain triggers that set us off, and there's something that we do, and that's often the habit, and that habit creates a result. Now, so I started to have to recognize. I took an inventory of some of my habits, and I was like, okay, what gets me into that mindset to do that one habit, and what is my normal result because of that habit? So I was able to start recognizing there's some things that move me forward, some things that take me backwards. All I said to myself was, I just want to be more aware of what I'm doing
Hmm.
versus just doing things without thinking about it. Does that make sense? Like I just wanted to be really more mindful of some of
Right.
my choices. So even when it came to what I ate, what I drank, how I moved, some of my work habits, some of my lifestyle habits, some of my family habits, I started to just take an inventory. And but I needed to have a very clear perspective in order to do that properly. And that's why, removing the alcohol and the drugs was a great way to just give me that focus. And but it took a lot of repetition.
Right.
you know, I wish I could say it was easy, but it wasn't easy. It wasn't hard, but it took work,
Hmm.
and so yeah, back to your question, why do we keep leaning into it? And I'm the same. Like, oh, I'll just binge on Netflix, like, it's okay. I can get to that work later. I can do that thing I said I would do with my family later. And then I start realizing, well, how do I feel after that 3 hours I just spent on Netflix? I'm like, well, I don't feel very good. I'd often feel guilty. I'd regret that I just spent that much time on it. And so my question to you, Harry, is like, so when you find yourself in that thing, it's like trying to remember the last time we had the experience. What was the result that it provided us with? If it was something that you regret, oh, hopefully you can bring that awareness to the forefront before you do it again, right?
Right.
Because I always say, I joke with my clients, I'm like, oh, listen, at the end of the day, you're never going to send me a message and say, Di, I regret eating that salad with salmon at lunch. Di, I regret going to the gym and working out today. I've never had any client ever say that to me,
Hmm.
ever. You know? And so think about that. Like, what are things that you do and do regularly that you don't regret? Things that make you feel good, but in a really healthy way versus the things that tend to not. And if you start thinking about that, like the things I'm doing today, well, I regret doing them come the end of the day and start to lean into that energy more so. And I find that, the more you do it, the more you practice it, wow, you start to develop some new lifestyle habits around that. And eventually, if we're repeated enough, we develop a lifestyle. And when I say lifestyle, I just mean our subconscious takes over. We do a lot of these things automatically.
Hmm.
Like I don't think about working. I just do it. I just go to the gym because I like it. I enjoy it. It's part of my everyday. So I go and I move my body with purpose. I get a little bit of a sweat on. I feel good for it. It makes me very productive. It helps me focus. It makes my relationship with my family a lot less tense. I
Right.
sleep better. I manage my stress better. And when I work out, I also know I eat better. I choose to eat certain things that keep me in that energy space, right? That feel good energy. I don't tend to crave certain things when I've been moving my body. So I know for me that exercising daily is that one thing that I can do. And by doing it makes the rest of the day easier. So one of the biggest questions and people I want to ask you, even Harry, like, what is the one habit that you do consistently that makes everything else in your life a little bit easier?
I'm for sure with exercise with you, like,
Awesome.
because I was a competitive swimmer for 11 years, and like
Wow.
even
What
before
was
that,
your race? Wh-
breaststroke. Do you know?
Oh, dude, you're crazy.
Yeah,
That's intense.
man, so when I went to uni, I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna be a sprinter. I just want to do the 50 and the 100, like 2 lengths
Yeah.
and 4 lengths. My coach is like, no, you're gonna do the 200. You're gonna do the 8 lengths of breaststroke. And like for anyone who
Wow.
doesn't know swimming, like 8 lengths
That's
doesn't seem
intense.
like that much,
That's
but
a lot. That's a lot.
it
I get it.
hurts so bad. But
Yeah.
like so for my whole life basically, I was used to like working out once, twice a day. And
Yeah.
then I retired, and then pretty much when I retired, COVID hit.
Okay.
So like not only did everything close, but my motivation went like it just shot all the way down. And I started
Right.
noticing like I was getting more anxious, I was getting antsy, I was getting, easily triggered by a lot of things, but it was because I wasn't
Mm,
moving my body. I was doing less than 1,000 steps a day. Like I think my
Wow.
average for
Yeah.
like the month was like 1,000 or 2,000. Like
Yeah.
I was not moving. And then
Yeah.
so once things started opening up again, I started going on walks, started, doing at home yoga. I
Nice.
just started doing Muay Thai in Whitby,
Oh,
like
great.
downtown.
Yeah.
Yeah, my body is in so much pain, but I needed it. And so just like you, man, like I need to get moving because it makes everything else seem less tense.
Mm. It's so good that you know that though, right? Like, when you really connect with that, it's yeah. I mean, we are all looking for some sort of instant gratification. Like, let's be honest. Like, we are motivated that way. We like the instant benefit, right? I mean, you
Oh
just
yeah.
look at our society. We like to buy things now and pay for it later.
Right.
Like that. I mean, it's Amazon Prime, right? Like, come on, I get it tomorrow or today. It's like
I
we're
know.
used to that instant fix, and we have to recognize often with a lot of the health and wellness side of things, it's not an instant fix, right? Like I didn't become obese one night. Like at age 9, I started eating a little bit differently and eating certain foods, and I kept doing that daily, right, without
Mhm.
moving my body. So yeah, over a 5-year period, I grew a lot. Wrong direction, but I grew a lot, right? Like, but it didn't happen already. And that's why I often joke with people. I'm like, if you went into McDonald's and had a Big Mac and you dropped dead an hour after, would you still choose to go in and eat it? Well, of course not. You wouldn't. Yeah, people would be like, "No, don't do that. You're killing yourself here." Like, but it doesn't happen like that. Things happen over time, gradually, right? Especially when it relates to our health and well-being. And the same applies if we want to get healthier. It happens gradually, you know.
Mhm.
But we can attain a certain instant gratification, especially you know how this is. Being a competitive athlete yourself, like you have a hard training session. You leave that session though, yeah, you might be fatigued, you might be tired, might be a little bit sore, but man, you feel good, don't you?
Oh yeah.
Like,
Oh, you
yeah,
feel like you're floating. Yeah, yeah.
yes, yeah, quite literally in your situation being in the pool, but yeah, it's
Yeah.
like, but seriously, you do, you have this sort of lightness, I like to say, as sore as, when we all like to complain about our workouts, right? Like we do,
Oh
we
yeah.
love doing them, but we love to talk about how sore we are. Like it, and I love it, right? I do. I love hearing people complain about how their bodies feel after, but I know they're complaining it's a positive way, right? Like they're celebrating, they're celebrating. Yes, I do feel this way, and my body thanks me for it.
Mhm.
Maybe not going up or downstairs, but right now it thanks me for it, and it's good, right? Like it's a great way to manage stress and anxiety, and it just shifts us in such a positive way. But it happens instantly. Instantly. Same with certain foods. I encourage people. Like if you eat a lot of sugar, well, try a sugar detox. Just 5 days. Cut sugar out for 5 days. The first 2 or 3 days, they're hard. They suck. I know. Okay, they do. It is. It's tough, right? It's like trying to go off caffeine. Same effect. Like I'm a caffeine drinker, and I'm
Mhm.
trying to curtail how much I drink of caffeine. I've noticed with COVID, my caffeine intake's gone way up.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, I got to bring that back down, and that's my New Year's goal is to try to reduce my intake for next year. And great, that's just a goal. But that being said, like we know by eating certain foods or restricting certain foods or food groups, we can see a fairly quick and pronounced change. Even in just our clarity of mind and focus, our energy, quality of workouts, right? Like it is instant. But the other results that most people want by doing those things, they don't happen instantly. And I think
Mhm.
that is the main issue, right? Is that we get discouraged if we don't see results right away. Like a lot of people get motivated to exercise. Why? Because they want to lose weight. That's just the nature of the industry. I mean, they're all talking about weight loss. And it's like, great, but what does the weight loss provide you? What is that emotional connection you have with losing weight? What happens to you? How does the rest of your life get better when you're not carrying around that extra 20 pounds? you know
Mhm.
Forget about all the front vanity stuff.
Right.
Vanity stuff aside, sure, yeah, you're going to look better, great, awesome, but let's remove ourselves from that. What else gets better? you know because that's the stuff that I find is really sustainable, and it makes the greatest amount of impact over time. Like it's fine, you look great, yeah, you're ready for your wedding, yeah, you get married 10 weeks from now, because I often would have people reach out, well, listen, I got to get married in less than 3 months, can you help me? I'm like, no, I'm probably not your guy, because I'm not going to be into any fad stuff. I'm not going to do any of that stuff. That's not who I am.
Yeah.
But there's lots of other people. I go on Instagram. Come on, you'll
Sure.
find some people.
They are everywhere.
But they are, and that's okay. And I'm not judging them. I'm just saying maybe they're a better solution for you
Mm,
because you're looking at something short term. Now, if you're talking about making some changes and keeping the changes, we can have a conversation,
right.
because we know a lot of us will go into a starvation mode and we'll
Oh, yeah.
double down on our workouts and we'll go into this prescriptive way of living life that we only live life like that for 3 months. And then we take away, get ourselves out of that, we achieve that goal, and then we're left with now what? We go right back to what we were doing before
Hmm.
because we haven't really created a new lifestyle. We just created a temporary habit to achieve a certain result. We got the result. Okay, done. Checking that off the list, going right back to what I was used to. It's just like,
Yeah.
oh no, it drives me nuts. And I know this only so well because I've done it so many times in my own life, so many times. And it definitely frustrates myself as well when I catch myself in that pattern.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I agree, man. Like it was hard for me to, because once swimming was done, like I
Mhm.
used the fact that like, oh, I have to be there for the team. Because I was a captain, so I was like, I have to be a good
Oh wow,
influence.
yeah, yeah.
I have to listen to my coach. Like I used all those as motivators, and then once
Mhm.
all those were gone, I was like, I don't have to do anything. And then so uh, I went into those waves as well, like where it was like I'm gonna not eat as much and just go all out for like 3 weeks and then look great. And then
Yeah,
I would get to that point and then go, all right, I got here, and then I would just gain all the weight again, and it wouldn't make any sense. So it wasn't until I started going, okay, ignore the looks for a second.
yeah,
How am I gonna feel, or
yeah.
like being wanting to achieve like this sense of feeling good inside as opposed to looking
Mm,
good. That's what motivates me now.
I love
I
it.
want to feel good inside, and then the outside will catch on, hopefully.
Yes.
I mean, I
Yeah,
think so, but
yeah. I think you're right. I think you're spot on, and I, I know there's a bit of a leap of faith, but the leap of faith is toward oneself, right? Like I trust in myself. I keep, again, it's all our whole life is based on perspective, right? Like, and it's
yeah.
our own personal perspective through our own personal experience, and everything that we learn from an external source, right? Like we read it, we listen to it, we watch it, like we heard somebody in line up at Starbucks talk about something, like we pick up on things, and often we just take things for granted that this just must be true, and I think there's that certain bias to just want to believe things sometimes, especially if confirmation bias is where we have a certain belief and then we just only seek out proof to prove the belief
Right.
rather than being open to other potentials, right? I look at flat earthers as an example. I don't know if you watched that documentary on Netflix. I found it very entertaining, and I listen. I think they have a lot of valid points, but there's interesting because they're seeking out proof to show that the Earth is flat. Meanwhile, not looking at all the other proof that shows that it's quite the opposite.
Hmm.
So we have this sort of bias in all of us, right? And I think it's just being aware of that. And but I think we know that we can affect our insides. When I mean that like without just the nutrition's kind of the obvious piece, but how we feed our mind, right? Like what do we feed our minds with? What are the association that we're around? Like who's influencing us and the way we think and the way we act? And where do we draw on that inspiration? These are all things that really became very inquisitive about, especially as I went through that shift about 11 years ago, and really the last 10 years has been me just focusing on personal development rather than professional development.
Hmm.
Because my 20s was all about professional development. That's all I
Yeah.
did. It's like more business books, more motivation books. Like it was all just really geared towards what I believe to be success, and chasing that. And the kind of business person or entrepreneur I needed to be to achieve that. And so anything that would feed me and elevate me on that level, I was all around. But I didn't do anything on the personal side. And so the long and short to this is like, well, how do you feed your mind, right? Like what is the inputs that are going in that influences your worldly perspective, and do you ever question it? And I say this more in a general way for you as being anybody that's listening or watching this,
Yeah.
but
Right.
like what is your influence, right? Like what's influencing some of your belief systems, and do you ever stop to question some of the beliefs that you have? Like my daughter, she's 17, my eldest daughter 17, and when the Black Lives Movement was really picking up steam there at the beginning, right around, I guess it was what, March and April, especially.
Yeah.
Um, she's just such an activist, right? I don't know where she gets it from, but she's just all about just, just things being fair, and she recognizes when types of people or populations or just certain beliefs are just not right. Like she knows they need to be challenged. And I mean, she would even call my wife and I out every once in a while. We would say something, but not even really thinking anything of it.
Hmm.
And she would just say, what you just said, like especially around the whole white privilege piece and all that. It's like, she would just challenge us. And you know what? She was right. She was right. And I was so impressed by that because, I just, we all have biases, and some of them are completely subconscious. Like we don't even know they're there, and so this last year has been really good for that. Just seeing so much of this in the media and just a lot of people like on social media. Like there's a lot of amazing changes that have happened this year, like crazy. Amidst this crazy year with a global pandemic, there's been some pretty amazing breakthroughs, not only with gender equality and racial equality, but just everything. Like it's been pretty remarkable. And I have to remind myself of that because it's so interesting how we can get so stuck in our own little personal bubbles. We've got this whole world outside of us, right? And so that when I talk about that challenging your inputs, I just mean guard your inputs more than anything, right? Like be choosy, be selective about what you allow in and what you
Hmm.
believe. And I think if we all did a little bit more of that, I think the world would be very different.
Yeah, definitely. It's hard now with social media, like feeding you stuff, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
Like I try to remind myself that, like you said, good things are happening this year, even if it overall it's been kind of weird.
yeah,
But it's hard to think that way when every morning you open Instagram and it's talking about how many deaths of COVID have
yeah.
happened every day. Social media makes it so tough. But you're completely right, man. You just gotta like have an open mind, but also you know be selective, I guess.
Yeah, and also challenge some of the stats being put out there. I know media is funny that way, right? Like they
Oh
like,
yeah.
I mean, it's a little clickbait. Even the mainstream media,
Oh,
right? Like, I mean, you look at like a Fox News, right? Don't tell me that's not clickbait. The whole thing's clickbait.
oh,
Like it's
all
just
of it.
all, it's always serving someone else's agenda. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, be inquisitive, question everything. It's nothing wrong to do that. Don't be afraid to challenge something that everybody else is accepting as to being absolutely true. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. It's just
Yeah.
how do you come to that result? It's sort of like the scientific method approach, right? It's like I'm going to question everything until I can prove it myself, or observe it myself. And that's something that I've had to really work on as well. Just and it really becomes apparent because the last 5 years before moving back to Vancouver, we were traveling. We traveled around North America. I decided to quit my career of 17 years, and my wife quit hers a month later and pulled the kids out of school. And we started traveling. We gave away all our stuff. We packed up the SUV and we're like, okay, well, we traveled around North America, and eventually we went overseas. And we spent 2.5 years in Southeast Asia, most of which in Bali. And when you start living amongst developing country cultures, you start to realize, like, man, we think we have all the answers, but I think
Mhm.
we've actually forgot some of the most basic fundamentals of living a great life. And when you look at Dan Butner's work, he did some work with National Geographic, and he did the research around the blue zones. And the blue zones are these 5 areas around the world where they decided to go study because they had more people living to be 100 or older.
Mm.
And these people aren't the way we think about someone in their hundreds in North America, we're like, you're probably just waiting in a home somewhere,
Yeah,
or
like
just
all
sitting in a
withered.
chair all day. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like not really doing much. You're just sort of sitting around waiting. No, but these people were thriving. They were contributing to society. They were active members. They were living on their own, like just thriving,
That's
like,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah. Like some of them were competing in sports still. Of course, in their age category. There's this
That's
lady, Ida.
insane.
Well, look up Ida Keeling. Ida Keeling on YouTube. She's now since passed, but before she passed, she competed in the 100-meter sprint. And she did 17 seconds. 17 seconds,
That's not
which,
bad at all.
dude, 17 seconds is pretty freaking awesome. Like
Pretty good.
it's, or sorry, was it 50? Sorry, it might have been a 50-meter sprint. Sorry, but I mean, it's no, nothing like oh gosh, what's his name? Who's the guy that's got the 100-meter, 50-meter sprint record right now? It's
50
Usain
or
Bolt, right?
yeah, yeah,
Is it
you
Usain? I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's you saying,
Usain Bolt.
which was whatever, like 8 something, right? Or 9 seconds. But so it's quite a bit more than that, but I don't care. If you're in the hundreds and you can do 17 seconds and 50 meters, like sign me up. I'm all for that. I don't know if I could do that. Like I'm like, wow.
Seriously.
But it's incredible to just see that, you know, even because we age doesn't mean we have to not be as vital and not have a certain standard of quality of life. And so he did this research, and it's really fascinating because he found that there was 9 common themes in all 5 of these places around the world. I mean, there was one place in Japan, there's a place in Italy, a place in the UK, a place in the States. So, and I think there was one in South America. Either way, so you got this nice little cross section of different countries, different cultures, but these 5 unique populations all had the highest density of people living 100 or older. And he found there was 9 themes. None of these themes cost money. It's all lifestyle.
Mm,
It's like they choose to eat most of their calories from whole foods, mostly plant-based. They still eat animal protein, but majority of their calories comes from plants. They have a little bit of alcohol, so some of them was wine. Japan, they tend to drink a little bit more wine rice, a little bit more sake, but just a little bit. They don't abuse it. They also have strong community connections, great ties with relationships with family. They prioritize family time. They take time to relax. They have great stress management, mental health management. They're active every day, but they don't go to the gym. They're just active. They move their bodies.
like walking and yeah.
Yeah, walking, gardening, dancing, like just living life. Like remarkable. But nothing was rocket science. Nothing cost money. It was just a choice to live life a certain way. So what's the deal? We got these people living to be in their hundreds, loving life. They live a simple life, but they're extremely happy. And so it's like I forget how there's a parable or a story that goes and talks about a gentleman. You work your whole life to save enough money, and then we determine that we can retire and be happy now. But it's like very often it's the opposite, right?
Right, yeah.
We can find happiness wherever we want it. It's just whether we choose to allow it into our life or not. Like it's just super interesting. I became really fascinated, especially after my dad passed. I was like, wow, he was the kind of guy. He worked his entire life, built a successful practice, eventually sold it, had a desire to travel with my stepmom, and they had done a lot of traveling, but he was like, retirement, he's going to do even more traveling, and then just as soon as he sold his business, it was just a health complication, and he passed away at an early age of 72, and he was
Mhm.
like young 72. Like you wouldn't have ever thought. You meet my dad, you'd be like, yeah, you're probably in your 50s. Like he looked young, and then it was just life, right? So it put things in perspective. I learned a lot by having that experience and going through the end of life with him, and it's just interesting when you start looking at some of these things. You start questioning what really matters, right? Like
Oh, yeah.
I make such a big deal out of some of the smallest things. I'm like, why, right? And that's interesting. I mean, I feel like our conversation is more philosophical now than anything, but you know what I mean. It's just it's interesting.
Yeah, no, definitely, like, I feel like our society is mostly just go, go, go.
Mm,
I feel like we can definitely
mm.
take a note or 2 from these 100-year-old people who can go
Yeah,
17 seconds in a 50 meter. Like,
yeah. They can sprint when they want
w
to.
wow, but,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
seriously, like, just I feel like there's no time in our society to say, like, "Oh, I need to slow down," or, like, "I need to
Mm,
spend more time with family." I feel like it's almost frowned upon.
yeah.
Maybe less so moving forward because we're talking about stuff like this, but
Mhm.
definitely, like, the last couple years or, like, the last couple decades have been, like, work, 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 and that
Right.
determines success, that determines happiness, when in reality, like, these people, they're loving their community members, they're loving their family, they're taking time out of their day to dance or, like, walk,
Yes,
like, and they're
yes.
living to be 100.
Yeah,
So
and thriving, right? Loving life, and
mhm,
it's very duplicatable. Like even when you look at their diet, it's largely like a Mediterranean diet, so there's lots of fishes, lots of fresh veggies and fruits, and just really simple, nothing super fancy, but you know, uh, almost paleo-ish, right? But they tend to eat and source foods more locally as well. It was really simple. Like my wife and I, we bought last year. She bought Christmas gifts for a lot of our family. Just bought the Blue Zone. They have a beautiful cookbook, and it's kind of neat. They show you all these different dishes, and it was great because then we started to implement at least a couple times a month having different meals from this, and it just gave us this sort of it brought it to a new level because we're like, wow, man, I could eat like this all the time. Like it's
yeah,
just super simple. It wasn't anything super fancy. It was just, but very nourishing, right? And But you start to realize that, man, we don't have to be super complicated when it comes to nutrition. I think there's a tendency, and I think it intimidates a lot of people. That's why there's gratification in just buying instantly made food, right? Like
Mm.
it's a lot easier, it's simpler. You don't have to think about it. But when we go that route, we tend to get a lot more of the preservatives and all of the other stuff, a lot of the sugar add-ins and the salt add-ins. Why? Because it's got to make the food taste good. Uh, and so it's reconnecting with some of these basics, right? And realizing we don't have to um, try to complicate things. I think back to your comment earlier, this desire to want to slow down. I love the minimalist movement. It's really what got us excited about the idea to travel. Like we were excited about the idea of simplifying our lifestyle to allow us to spend more time as a full-time family. And so it was very freeing. It was intimidating. I mean, it wasn't easy. Getting rid of all of our stuff was like, wow, we had amassed a lot of stuff in our time together, and
Right.
kids and their toys and beds and furniture. Like it's just we had so much stuff. And to embrace this minimalist lifestyle, we had to start to release a lot of that stuff. And um, it was so good once we were done though, and we got on the road. It was freeing knowing that anything that we needed was in the vehicle. It was in the suitcases in the back. Like that's it. That's all we need right now to be functional. And even then, if we lost those suitcases, you know what? We're okay.
Yeah.
Everything will be fine. It's not that big of a deal. But there's something to that I think that minimalist, that desire to want to minimalize things and not be so attached to so many things and stuff. There's something to it. I mean, there's quite the movement out there around this, even like the tiny house movement, right? Like,
Oh, I've
or
seen
people,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and van living, right? Like just
Van living. Yeah.
van life, like awesome. I mean, that's our next foray. Once kids graduate high school, we're going to start traveling again. And my aspiration is let's get a van and let's start driving. It's just this, and that's what we want to do. We're going to wait for the kids to finish, but we got a couple of years, but that's the next phase.
Mm.
And so I like that simpler lifestyle. And it's so cool now. We all know this now. I think that's one of the benefits of COVID. Everyone's realized that pretty much most of our jobs can be done remotely.
Yeah.
Like most of the, like a lot of people I know that were going to an office, they're like, why do I ever have to go back to the office? They don't really don't need to be in the office. And
No.
so I think there's going to be a sort of, once everything opens up again, I think we'll see a nice spike in people, embracing more of a, I mean, I don't want to say nomadic lifestyle, but I think there's going to be a lot more minimalism embraced, because I think people are going to realize, wow, as much as I thought I needed a permanent place to be all the time, I don't, our definition of what it means to be home, I think will change.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
My my friend lived in a van for, I want to say, half a year. He just
Cool.
drove across the coast of Australia, and he
Beautiful.
came back and he
Wow.
was like, "Man, I don't know why I don't do that all the time." And then he went to
Yeah.
Hawaii and did the same thing. He's just,
It's
and
awesome.
like he just, that's what he does now. It's
It's
crazy.
beautiful.
Not,
It's
it's
great.
crazy in a good way. That's what I meant.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
Dreaming.
but often we'll call it crazy because it's like, wow, it's like just so out of the normal of what we
Hmm.
establish as normal now as a society, right? So we think it's an outlier. You must be crazy. But it's like, but it's so true, right? A lot of us, but this is the thing that we noticed when we started doing as a family, especially, and we had some people like, oh, you are crazy. Like, you just left a
Yeah.
great
Yeah. I bet.
career. Your wife left. Like, what are you going to do about kids in school? Like, we had people like, oh, it's child abuse, take your kids out of
Mm.
school. And I'm like, what are you talking about? But, but what we would hear more often than not was, man, you guys are so awesome. You're so lucky. Man, I really wish we could do that. Like, and I'm like,
You can.
why? Why wish? Like,
Yeah.
just gosh, we didn't have a lot of money in the bank. It's not like we were rich. Like, no, no, we were rich in life experiences,
Right.
not monetarily. But we knew that by changing how we live our life, we could do this. Like we could make a go at it and sustain it. And yeah, I had to learn new ways of generating income, especially from a remote perspective. But gosh, it was something that we wanted to do. And what the funny thing is we started. I don't know if you've ever seen Tim Ferriss does a wonderful TED talk where he talks about fear setting. This idea of basically, he's very. It's just a neat exercise. Like, I mean, when you find yourself challenged by something, it's like really sit with the fear. Fear often holds us back from doing things. Whether we're
Mhm.
fear of unknown, fear of failure, fear of success, whatever it might be. But for us, it was like, oh gosh, what will happen? Like, what if we run out of money and we're in the middle of, some state and we don't know where to go and what to do? And like, what if, right? So you have all these fears, and most of them, as we know, fears of potential futures rarely ever happen that way.
Mhm. Right.
It's like a waste of energy and time. But we had those concerns. So what Tim Ferriss talks about is this idea of fear setting, where it's like really sit with the fear. Ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Like actually think about it. What is the worst thing? When we thought about it, we're like, yeah, we could run out of money. Well, I'd have to go to my parents, ask them for a little bit of money so we could get home, and maybe we live in a basement for a little while, but we're employable. We can get jobs again. Like it really wasn't that big of a fear,
Right.
and if that was the biggest fear and biggest concern we had with traveling as a family, it's like, come on, is that really enough to not do it?
No.
No,
No way.
no, it wasn't. But we had to go through that process.
Right.
And so that's what I always tell people. It's like, hey, well, you have this crazy ambitious dream and that's something that you want to do. Well, what's holding you back? And it's usually fear of some sort. So sit with the fear. Ask yourself, what if? What if that did happen? What then? You know, usually we can rationalize the fear. And that was the point of Tim Ferriss's TED Talk. And just look it up, Tim Ferriss TED Talk. It's the one that comes up. And yeah, I just love that exercise. It's something that I've practiced regularly, in my own life now when I find myself being intimidated by something new,
Mhm.
especially, like what's the worst that can happen? And probably famous last words for some, but I've been
Yeah,
fortunate. I'm
right.
still here. So it's worked out all right.
Yeah, no, we did that I had to do that to, like, a minor degree when I was swimming
Mm.
because, like, I have anxiety and depression, but, like, it would get
Mhm.
inflated before a race, and I'd
Oh,
start
okay. Yeah.
overthinking. I'd be like, "Man, I'm so screwed, like, I'm gonna lose the race. I'm gonna, like, do
Mm.
all these things." And so I would have to, like, sit down with my dad, and he'd be like, what are you afraid of?" And I was like dying, and he's like, "You're not gonna die in your race." He's like, you've been swimming
Yeah.
for 11 years, you're not gonna
Yeah.
die, and there's lifeguards
Yeah.
everywhere, and everyone on deck knows how to swim. Like, if that's your biggest fear, let that go. So
For sure.
it took a long time, but like you eventually get to a point where you're like, all these what ifs are holding me back from actually having a good race.
Yeah.
If you just like throw away that and just focus on the race, you're gonna do a lot better. It's the same thing with life. You just got to throw all those what ifs out.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. No, yeah, you have a wise dad.
Don't tell him that. He doesn't want his ego boosted.
But that's great. But that's exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, exactly what you're doing there is the same that you just do in other situations. It's kind of cool, when you really start thinking about life. Like we learn some pretty basic processes for dealing with certain situations. And we often forget, we've overcome many challenges. Us as a species, you think about humanity, right? Why are we top of the food chain? Well, we're not the strongest on the planet. I mean,
No.
elephants are stronger than us, tigers and bears and lions. Like, I mean, geesh, there's been a lot of species that could kick the crap out of humans for
Oh yeah.
sure.
Mhm.
Yet we were resilient. We've populated the planet. Now, there's some people that might have a negative opinion of some of the things that we've done that we could have done better. Fair enough. I'm not going to get into that conversation. But if you just look at us as a species, we are very resilient.
Mhm.
So in our DNA, we've got this amazing ability to thrive. And we don't have all the stresses like we used to. You don't have to look at the tree across the street and be worried that, oh, is there a tiger behind that? Like
Right. Yeah.
we don't have those same fears. Yet we do have fear embedded in us, those safety mechanisms, right? To try to keep us alive.
Mhm.
And so we tend to create a lot more fears than we ever had to deal with, at least what our Paleolithic ancestors used to have to deal with, right?
Mhm.
And and so we have to wonder, like some of the fears that we have, is it a rational fear at all? And like, is this really a matter of life and death? Most of the times it's not. And yet we're still afraid. And listen, I'm afraid of lots of stuff too. But
Mhm.
when I sit with the fear and I start to ask myself, well, what am I really afraid of here? And it's wild when you really start to dissect your own fears and why you feel a certain way towards certain things. It's like, whoa. Most of the time, it's just learned behavior.
Mhm.
It's just what we learned, either from inexperience or from maybe a negative experience, or someone just implanted an idea in our head at some point in time. And now we've sought out the proof. Remember, I was talking about confirmation bias.
Right.
This is crazy what I see in a lot of people. And I'm guilty of this too. Like we have a belief that we're no good. We have a belief that we suck at something.
Mhm.
And so all we do is we look for proof to validate that belief.
Right. Yeah.
you know so we own it now. It's like a label that we wear, a badge of honor. No, I suck at skateboarding. I fell once. I tried it once. And yeah, no, I suck at it. Like I tried it once. Like, but growing up with that belief, now I suck at skateboarding. I'm a crappy skateboarder. Like, did I really ever try it? But no, but I had somebody fall and they made fun of me when I fell off the first time. And I was just like, but it stuck with me, and it dissuaded me from ever getting on a skateboard again.
Hmm.
Like, I remember when I was a teenager. It's amazing though. But like, I watch guys on skateboards and I live right off the seawall. So there's lots of skateboards going
Oh, I
by. And
bet.
I'm always like, man, that looks like so much fun. I really wish I would have kept skateboarding, like,
Hmm.
and then I think back, well, no, but I kind of suck at skateboarding. Well, why do I suck on the skateboard? Well, remember I fell off. Remember that kid made fun of me. Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So when you start to really think about some of these fears and some of our belief systems, we realize, man, how much am I limiting myself based on some of these beliefs? It's just it's wild, right? And
Hmm.
it's really in the last 5 years I've started to become much more aware of some of these limiting beliefs in my own life. And you got to peel them back like layers of an onion, right? It's just like one at a time. It's like, oh, okay, that's crap. Nope, nope, that one's not serving me. Oh, I got to prove no, I got to prove this one wrong. Like it's interesting, right? To create that space to start to do that. And I'm not saying it's easy by any means, but it's pretty cool though. As you start to work through it, I'm not saying that the fear goes away, but you do learn how to rationalize it a bit more. You start to understand some of the motivations. So I think this sort of is full circle to what you were saying earlier about YouTube, right? We tend to do these things and we know it's not moving us forward in life, yet we do them anyways, you know?
Hmm.
And we have some of these habits and it's sometimes it's just avoidance, right? We're avoiding other things, that, and it's cool. Once we start to realize these habits that we have, you can start to change them. I guess always step one, right? Is just being aware of some of the habits that aren't serving us. That's a great place to start with. It's like, okay, I know this isn't great for me. At least I'm aware that I do it. That's
Right.
one thing. Because at least now you can say, well, I'm aware of it, right? It's like, oh, I didn't even notice I did that. It's like, what? How did you not notice that? There's
Yeah.
probably an app for that, so start tracking that, but yeah, anyways.
Yeah. It's hard to identify it when you're in it. It's almost like
Hmm.
when
Yeah.
like your friend's in a bad relationship and you're like, you got to get out of it, and he's like, what do you mean, we're great? And then he gets out, he's like, oh
Yes.
wow, that was terrible. Because once you're when you're in it, you don't realize it ever.
Yeah, yeah. It's so true, right? And yeah, there's actually a crazy study. I'm gonna have to find the link and send it to you here. But the synopsis of this link, and it's funny. I found out about it because there was a guy that did a TED talk on it, but I actually read the article before I saw the TED talk. And this doctor did some research on this exact thing, and I forget there's a term for it. There's an actual psychological term, but when we're in it, yeah, life is horrible, right? Like, I mean, when we're dealing with something, and what he did was he looked at people that had colonoscopies. Okay, so not a pleasant experience by any
No.
means, right? Like, it's not. And but so what he would do is he would survey these people, and what they found was, I guess during a typical, again, I haven't had one of these yet, so I'm sort of going off what he reported. I'm getting to the age where I'll probably need one, but I'm not there yet.
Right.
But so he's interviewing these people and doing the survey, and what he found was is during people's typical experience, and I guess the average time it takes is just under a half an hour. What is noticed most of the time is there's kind of a spike around the 17-minute mark. About halfway through the procedure, there's sort of a peak of where the discomfort or potential a little bit of pain may happen. And what they found was if people ended the procedure on that note, so if you end it on the most painful part, their memory of that 6, 12 years of later is always horrendous.
Mm.
Like their memory, their recounting of it's like, oh my gosh, it was an awful experience. Like, oh, it was a 9 out of 10. Like their recollection of the memory, the way they frame it, it's like it was the worst thing ever. But what they found was if they ended the procedure on a downside, right? So they get through that sort of 15, 17-minute mark where the peak discomfort happens, and they would end it, say, at 25 minutes, where it's all come back down to say like a 2 out of 10 kind of discomfort. Then interviewing them with the same questions, their recollection of it is far nicer. Like,
Mm.
oh, it wasn't that bad. It's not big. It was the same procedure. They experienced the same levels of discomfort, but because their last memory of it wasn't so negative, their future representation of it is far less. So it's like, it's interesting how we remember things, especially things that were hard, like the challenges that we've had or we've overcome. They'll never be as worse as they were when we were in it. Yet the way we remember it it's so different than how it might have actually happened.
Hmm.
And so it's super interesting. We start thinking about some of our own challenges we've overcome, right? And I think it's also why we're sort of destined to repeat things so many damn times. As
Right.
bad as they may be, we do sometimes do things that we know aren't good for us, but we'll do them anyways. And everybody that's ever been drunk and hungover knows exactly what I'm talking about,
Oh my,
right?
yeah.
You wake up the next morning, I'll never drink again.
And then you drink
And
that
then
night.
oh yeah, yeah, that's right. It's amazing. Wow, gosh, 24 hours later. Okay, I guess I could have one. Like it's. But isn't it funny? Like how we are, like, just our memory, the way it works, and the motivation aspect, and yeah, I'm always fascinated, but just by how our mind works, right? Like it's just
Hmm.
so interesting, and yeah. Anyways, we're interesting balls of flesh and blood and everything else, right? It's we're all the same, man. All the same.
I know. At the deep core, we're all the same.
Yeah, yeah.
And
We're all trying to figure it out, you know?
ain't that the truth? Um, I wanted to get into because you mentioned to me that you went to a meditation retreat in Thailand, like a
Yeah, yeah.
am I going to say this right? Vipassana?
Yeah, yeah, Vipassana, yep,
Yeah.
bang on.
So, what exactly is that, and how did that change you and your views on life?
Oh, man. Well, so I was someone that always tried to meditate, but I'd always struggle with meditation, and so I'd meditate, but not consistently. I'd do 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there, I'd work on some breathing, but it wasn't really a consistent practice. But I did every time I would do it, I would always feel better. It's like one of those weird things, right? Like you do it, like 15 minutes of just closing your eyes, focus on your breath, maybe listening to some, like even like one of my favorite things is just to go walk in nature, right? And just that for me, that is meditative, right? Like it's just a calming, soothing effect, and you always feel good afterwards. And yet, I wasn't consistent, knowing that it was going to benefit. I met, or actually had a business coach, and I'd been working with him a few months, and then he's like, "Well, I'm going away for a couple weeks," and I'm like, "Okay, well, where are you going?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm going to do this 10-day silent retreat." And I'm like, "Oh, really? Well, that's interesting. What do you do during those 10 days?" He goes, "Oh, you meditate every day, all day." I'm like all day, like yeah, no talking. He's like, "Yeah, there's no talking, there's no writing." Like no electronics, like no exercise. I'm like, dude, no fun. Like,
What?
what are you doing, man? This is crazy. I'm like, well, good luck, buddy, because there's no way I'd ever do that. And that was my mindset. It was like, nah, I could never do that. Like, you talk about these belief systems, right? I'm just like,
Mhm.
no, I struggle with 5 to 10 minutes of meditation. There's no way I can do 10 days all day.
Right.
No. He came back and I was like, whoa, who is this guy? I was like, man, I'm talking Yoda and Buddha all mixed into one here. Like, this is like,
Wow.
whoa, where did my coach go? Like, and it was cool, but he was just super, like, just weird, man. It was just weird. And I was impressed. I was like, okay, well, clearly there was a lot of value gain. And just his whole aura shifted, and I'm not someone that gets into all that sort of, I shouldn't say that. Like, I do get into, but I try to not use a lot of terminology that's kind of out there on the other side of things. Like
Mhm.
I'm trying
Okay.
to be a bit more realistic and also more accessible. So I try to relate things in a more relatable way. So when you start talking about energies and people's auras and all this stuff, it's like I could just tell that his just being had shifted. Like he was just
Mhm.
like a different dude. He was kind of glowing, but he was just calm, collected. You could tell he was focused. Like it was just, well, I was very impressed. Because if you saw him before and then you saw him after, you'd be like, these are two different people. They look the same, but they're very different. And so that was my first impression. I was like, wow, this thing's obviously pretty powerful. And then I sort of dismissed it and it was like, okay, well, good for him. It's never going to be my thing. Anyways, over the next 6 months, I had two separate conversations with two other individuals that I respected greatly that had just experienced that as well, speaking very highly. And I was like, okay, the universe, if you believe this stuff, is obviously
Bring
trying to tell me something here, right? Yeah,
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 right.
exactly. The more I was pushing it away, the more it was coming at me. And so I was like, I remember talking to my wife. I was like, I think I'm meant to do this. Like, I think this is what it is. And she's like, well, why don't you go online and find out about it? And, we were living in Bali at the time. I founded the Vipassana Center, so a meditation center in Thailand. And we were like, well, we hadn't gone to Thailand yet as a family. So let's make a family trip out of it. We'll go there together and you go do your thing. We'll go back to Bali and you come back and join us after. And I was like, all right, well, let's make it happen. And so that was it. And it was interesting because the way Vipassana works, they pick us up in Bangkok, then they drive almost 3 hours northeast of Bangkok. So it's out in the middle of the jungle. And it's just this meditation center that's been built, and it was beautiful. I was like, wow, this is like a resort, man. This is pretty cool, And we get off the bus and they segregate all men from women. So the women go off on one side and men go off on another, and then you go through this little orientation. They take all your electronics, all your writing utensils, pretty much everything. They let you keep like your toothbrush, toothpaste, a little bit of shampoo and soap that you may have brought, and your clothing. So you get to keep that. And then you get shown to your rooms, and then you come back out, and they have this nice orientation. You get to watch this little video, and then right from that point on, 7 p.m. onward, no more talking. You don't make eye contact. You don't talk to anybody. They give you sort of this very specific regimented schedule where you know where you need to be by what time, and you just show up. And so it really, you got your dormitory, you've got the kitchen area where we eat one meal a day. It's a vegetarian meal once a day, and then you have the meditation hall. So that was it. There's these three places that we would just revolve between, and you go into the meditation hall. It's just a bunch of pillows on the ground, basically, and you sit down. And first 3 days they're teaching you this meditation practice called Vipassana, where it's literally breathing air in through your nose and out through the mouth, and closing the eyes, and really just trying to the true Vipassana is 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at night. Obviously we're there and we're doing multiple sessions every day, all day, literally in the meditation hall from 5 a.m. till 9 p.m., other
Wow.
than a couple little breaks. So yeah, it's intense. Like it's not like it was mentally the hardest thing I've ever done.
Hmm.
Because what I learned really quick here was that I'd close my eyes, I'd do the breath work, I'd be there trying to really clear my mind. And the more I tried to clear my mind, the noisier it became.
Right.
Like I realized there was nothing noisier anywhere I'd ever been in my life other than my mind at that time. Like it was crazy how much I had going on up here. Because you take away all the distractions and you turn the focus inward, because we're so used to focusing on everything outside of us. Here was 10 days of me just focusing everything inward. And I was like, whoa, there's a lot going on in there, and so the first 3 days are just spent teaching you how to breathe. And it's like ridiculous, right? Like it's like 10 days. Anyways, and I'm like day 3, and I'm like, well, okay, well, when are we going to start like meditating? Like, because here I am thinking we're just breathing, and then day 4 and 5, and and the interesting thing was, you can leave at any time. Like there's
Hmm.
nothing keeping you there, and it's all donation based. So I hadn't even paid any money yet. It's me being there was based on people that had already done a Vipassana previously that donate to keep the center going. And it's all volunteers that come in, and they're usually people that have already done their own Vipassana retreat, come back to serve on a retreat. So it's what keeps going. It's super accessible. Anybody can do this anywhere. You look it up online, vipassana.org. They got centers all around the world now. And
Wow.
they're like, you can go for free. Like you don't have to pay any money. And obviously I made a donation after I completed to help the next person that wanted to come. You instinctively want to do that, right? But people would up and leave. I remember on the first day there was a guy off to my left, and you're not really supposed to make eye contact, but you get an awareness because you can still, when you're coming in to sit down, you can see where everybody are. We started with just almost 50 guys. By the end of it, we were down into the mid 30s.
Wow.
So we lost a good chunk of people, and just throughout, right? Just because it's not easy. It's not like I had aches and pains in my body that were never there before, because my body was like, dude, what are you doing? Like
Yeah.
seriously, like it was the craziest thing. I don't know how else to explain it other than my body was rebelling. It was
Hmm.
like, move, dude. Don't just sit here. This is awful. Like it was just, but it was all my mind producing this discomfort. And it was wild, right? And so you have to sort of sit with that and work through it. And eventually you get to a point where all of a sudden, whew, you just let go. And just it's weird to describe this, but everything just, you get this sort of warmth that comes over you, and this instant clarity and calmness. It's almost like the world just gave you a big hug.
Wow.
That's probably the easiest way to describe it. It's like this big caress, like, hey, you're just part of everything else. Like everything's connected. It was, I don't know how to put it into words, and that was just a weird feeling. But leaving there afterwards, after the 10 days are done, it's day 11, and you do your morning meditation together. They come back, and then they all of a sudden now you can talk. So the code of silence is done. And here's all these guys that I had been around in the same space, but never made any contact, never talked to, because even us coming in off the bus, no one was really talking. And I realized, and this is the craziest thing. So these is one of the lessons I learned here, was that after the fact, I'm seeing all these guys. I'm starting to connect with them and say hi and learn a bit about them. How was their experience? And I realized I was judging these people throughout the entire time,
Mm.
making up stories, looking at them, just creating what I believe to be who those people might be. Do you know what I mean? Like you just
Yeah.
see all these people, and I'm just like presuming, well, this person must be like that, and that person's like this, and then all of a sudden you start talking to them. It's like, whoa, I was way off the mark.
Yeah.
Like this one guy that he was an older guy, probably in his, I'd say late 50s, and he was a business owner, owned a couple of vegan restaurants or vegan grocery stores back in the UK, and but at the time, I just thought he was like a retired professor or something like that. Like I remember
Mm.
just thinking all these things, and then started talking to him. He's like, he's an entrepreneur. He's got a successful business in the UK. He makes a point of doing a Vipassana every year. He's been to this same center a couple times. Like he found it, and it's one that he keeps coming back to. And it was just interesting talking because I had this whole idea of who I believed him to be, just based on my own mind, trying to make sense of things just by how it observes.
Mhm.
And I realized if this happened in this controlled environment, how much does this happen to me every day in everyday life?
Right.
And it happens all the time. We're always trying to make sense of everything that's happening outside of us. And we just base everything on previous experience. We're so quick to judge, so quick to try to make sense of everything when often we make up our own reality. It's like wild. So that was one of the effects. And I remember seeing my family for the first time afterwards. My kids pulled my wife aside and were like, what happened to dad? Like like little things that they would do around the house. And you got to imagine, I got teenage girls, and they'd have their friends over, and they just, they're crazy. Like they're just crazy. Like, teenage
Mhm.
girls are crazy. Okay, I'll
Oh,
put
yeah.
it that way. And they have a lot of energy, and sometimes, I'd be short on my fuse, and I would just bark at them to be like, "Hey, tone it down," like stuff like that. But nothing. Like they weren't getting anything out of me. I was like, whatever, everything's good, like super chill. You would think I was high, right? Like it was just
Right.
like I am chill, and and I, it stayed like that for a while. And I didn't maintain my Vipassana practice, so it's traditionally 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour at night. I didn't maintain that. That would just it wasn't feasible for me. It just didn't feel right. But I've maintained a practice of meditation, and yeah, so I'm able to shift back into that sort of that state fairly easily. And
Mhm.
that's the one thing I took away from that experience. And it was call it a mind opener, a body opener, like whatever you want. It was just a great way to become much more aware of how my mind works and how I interpret things, but also how I react to things so quickly. And so yeah, it was definitely life changing. I wish I had done it when I was younger.
Mm.
That's my own thing. People often ask, well, is like, would you do it again? I'm like, I might do it again. I don't know if I'll do a 10-day. I did do a 3-day. Everybody starts with a 10-day though. Like you have to do the introductory program, the course, which is a
Right.
10-day. After you've done it 10 days, you can come back and do a 3-day. They even sometimes will do I think a 5-day. You could do a 30-day or a 60-day. Like I'm
Oh
like,
my god.
no way, man. There's no way. Like there was monks there as well. And some
Mhm.
monks were there. Like I think one person had been there for 6 months doing this
Wow.
every day. Like just every day. That's all they do. Like, and I was
Yeah,
just
they don't speak, right?
no, no, there's no talking, like nothing. Like when you're there on a Vipassana, like they're there specifically because they're on that. I don't know what you would call it. They have a term for it, but basically they're living like monks. They're
Mm.
they're there all by donation. Like their meals are provided. Like it's remarkable what they do. But I'm like, yeah, I can't do that. That's
Wow.
not for me. But I always am amazed at the people that have that fortitude to just go and do that kind of work. Like because it's a lot of. I mean, you talk about self development. I mean, there's wow. That's all I
Mhm.
can say. Wow, like it takes a lot. But I do welcome or invite people to, if they intrigued by this. I've got a couple articles on my site. I sort of talk about my experience and a little bit more on the Vipassana and provide some links to where you can get more resources and some videos on it. And the gentleman that really brought Vipassana to the mainstream, or at least as mainstream as it could possibly be in that space, his name was S.N. Goenka. And so he's the one that you really tend to read about a lot. And a lot of the books that have been written reference him. And he passed away, I think, in 2011, but his teachings live on. And so even every night at 9 p.m., when the day was over, they would play a lecture from him. They're anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. Most of them are on YouTube, but they're really quite inspiring. quite inspiring, and it deepens your connection with the practice when you have that background and that teaching element.
Right.
The Vipassana, for those that aren't aware, is considered the meditation practice that allowed Buddha uh, to become the enlightened one. Well, sorry, Buddha means enlightened one. So it was Siddhartha was the guy that sat under the tree seeking enlightenment, and it was Vipassana meditation that he was doing under the tree that provided him, basically helped him become Buddha, the
Mhm.
enlightened one. So that's where that historical reference to Buddhism comes in. But just so you know, when you go to a Vipassana center, it is non-denominational. So there's no religions. Like there was lots of different religions represented there on that retreat, but they don't. There's nothing like there's no dogma being perpetrated throughout. So I like people to know that because I know there were Buddhists there for sure because Vipassana is one of their traditions. But there wasn't. It's not like you have to be a Buddhist or you have to be a Christian or you have to be any other religion to go and participate. It's open for everyone. It's so that was one thing that really attracted me was the fact that okay, this is great. I'm going to really do a journey inward. This is not about any religion or any religious track. Like this is just me going to learn a new way, learn myself a little bit differently.
Mhm. And you guys are, like, in nature when you do this? Like,
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Yeah.
yeah? Oh,
It,
man.
well, this center was in the middle of the jungle, like literally. Like, and at the time of the year when I was in Thailand, this is during the tail end of the rainy season. So there was a couple nights where it was like I had not seen that much rain. Like it rained for 30 minutes, but it looked like someone took a fire hose and was just
Yeah.
like spraying it. Like, it was crazy. We came out and there was like it was like a little mini flood, like, and I've never heard so many frogs in my life. Like
Oh,
it
my
was
bad.
deafening. Like I needed earplugs because it was so loud. That and like obviously the crickets and well, I mean just whatever. All the animals were going crazy, but it was beautiful. Like I love that experience. But I know also like even here in Vancouver in BC, it's about 4 hours north. There is a Vipassana center out in the middle of the Okanagan. And I mean, it's out in the middle of nowhere because I think a lot of these Vipassana centers they are based. They run because of donations,
Mhm.
so they tend to be in remote places. Let's put it that way. And but they're all over. Like it's crazy. If you go to the Vipassana.org site, they are everywhere. Like every country's got a Vipassana center, and you just have to register. And once you get accepted, you show up, and they take care of everything for you. Like it's. I'm just amazed that there's that opportunity for people that want to explore this. It's there. Now you have to create space to have the give yourself 14 days. You're going to need at least 2 or 3 days post Vipassana to sort of get yourself reacclimatized to moving back into the public life.
Right, yeah, you can't
I
just jump right in.
no, I fortunately I got an Airbnb in Bangkok, so I did have to go back to Bangkok, but then I had a nice recluse Airbnb, and I checked in there for a couple of days before I went back home to Bali to be with my family. I just needed a couple of days on my own to decompress and just sort of assimilate some of the things I learned, unpack my mind, and before I went back. So I pretty much hung out in Airbnb for like 2 days in Bangkok, by
Yeah.
myself. Uber food. It was like I didn't even leave the place. I was just like, I'm just gonna stay here. Yeah. But,
Man. Yeah, no, I try to stress that, with, like, my friends and people who reach out to me, like,
mhm,
I've had a lot of people during this pandemic especially who are like, "I've been feeling really down and I've been feeling really anxious." And I'm like, "Have you tried, like, walking in a forest
mm,
or going outside?" And they're like,
yes.
"No." And I'm like, "Well, just go out and try for, like, 20 minutes. Just
Yeah.
go through a forest, like walk through it." And I forget where I read this, but I read somewhere that they recommend like 30 to 40 minutes in nature a day, and you
Mm,
just feel
mm,
better. And I noticed that when I started going, because as a kid, I loved going into nature. But like
ah,
once like high school and college and work started climbing up and piling
mhm,
up, I realized I wasn't doing that as much,
mhm.
and you could feel it. And then once you start getting, that's why I really I mean, COVID has its negatives, but one positive was it gave me the ability to be able to do that, and you
Yes.
feel so much
Yes.
better when you're in nature.
Absolutely. I agree with you. It's amazing. That's one thing I've noticed in COVID as well, especially during some of the lockdowns. I mean, all I could do is go outside and walk,
Hmm.
and I love it. And it's one thing I've maintained. It doesn't matter if there's lockdown or they open things up. Like I still walk every day. I try to get my I have a sort of a goal of 10,000 steps. If I can do that, that feels pretty good. And it gets me out. And I listen to Audible, my audiobooks a lot of the time. So just get out and I listen to that. So I'm feeding my mind while I'm feeding my body and my spirit. And I feel great, get up for an hour in the morning, do a little bit in the afternoon or an evening. And it's awesome. We can be so productive. We can do certain things while we're doing that. So we like I meet so many people that say, "Well, I'd love to read more. I just don't have the time." I'm like, "Well, do you really? Like, like what's your schedule look like in a day?" And so and even people say, "Oh, I don't have time to exercise." I'm like, "Well, can you get out and walk? Like you could walk, you could talk, like you have conference calls. Well, just take it outside. Like
Mhm.
we it's the one advantage to having so much amazing digital options these days, and our phones keep us connected everywhere. I mean, I did a Zoom call last week while I was out walking, like whatever, who cares? Like I tell people like, this is just me and deal with it. Like, you got a problem with that? Tough. Like I'm doing this.
Yeah, I'm
So,
not gonna change.
no, it's like, this is just me, like whatever. So I think it's just people creating the space for themselves to just try. Like, just try it. Like, what's stopping you? Like,
Mm.
really? And it's the simplest of things. It's just a little change, but it's often the smallest of changes that create the greatest amount of impact long term in our lives. Both positively or negatively.
Right.
But most of the time in the positive light. So just get into it. Just give yourself the space to try something different, and I think people will be pleasantly surprised when they do.
Yeah, well, like, I mean, like when you try it, what you have nothing to lose. If you
No.
go in just saying I'm gonna try it, it's like that's like me with I'm gonna bring up Muay Thai again
Oh
because
yes, yeah,
because a part of me was scared, and my friends were like, my friends kept asking me, they're like, "Aren't you scared?" I'm like, I've never fought in my life. I was
yeah.
like, any expectation I have should not be there. I'm just going in to try it.
Yeah.
And once I got that down, I'm like a pro fighter. No, I'm kidding. But like,
Yeah.
I'm like the best they've ever seen. It's been 4 days.
You're
No.
an athlete though. And the cool thing is about athletes, you have that mindset, right? So you also know your body really well, which is,
Mhm.
and that comes just with practice, right? Like even if you're not an athlete, doesn't mean you shouldn't try things. It just means your learning curve might be a little bit steeper, right? Like it might take
Right.
you a little bit longer to learn. That's okay. Your body will learn. We're all adapt. But I
Mhm.
can imagine as an athlete, it must be nice having that outlet again, right? That
Oh,
someplace to be competitive with yourself, especially.
yeah. Yeah, no, my friends who aren't athletes, they thought I was crazy the next day because we've already mentioned this today, but, I woke up and I was like, "I can't move," but I was excited about it. I was
Yeah,
like, "I'm so sore, I can barely
I
text you."
bet.
And they're like, "That's a good thing?" I'm like, "Yes, I haven't felt this way since January."
Yes.
Like,
Ah,
it
that's
feels great.
huge. It's
Oh,
huge.
it was like a little
Yeah.
sense of normalcy again, which was
Yeah.
nice.
It's amazing though. The body wants it. It does crave it, right? And it's once you create that lifestyle around that, it will always be there. And it's just remembering and locking in how good you feel after the fact. Like I said, you don't regret it, right? I mean, yeah, I'm sore, but I don't regret going and working out.
No.
You know, we don't regret certain things, and so like, why not doing more of the things that we don't regret?
Mhm.
Simple
Yes.
enough, reaching out to a friend you haven't spoken to in a long time. Do you ever regret taking the time to do that? No. Do you regret not talking to them, especially if all of a sudden something happens and you can't talk to them? Yeah, that is a regret you'll live with.
Mhm.
So I guess it's just always sort of framing things that way. Will I regret doing this thing? If you just ask yourself, will I regret doing this? Well, no. Will I regret not doing it? Yeah. Okay. I think pretty simply, I think you got the answer, right? Like, and I think it's just again that way of just asking ourselves questions at times, and that's how we learn, right? We have to ask questions, and fortunately for us, we are a fairly resilient species, and we're adept at seeking answers, and
Mhm.
not always relying on Google to find them.
Right, yeah.
you know?
It's so simple, but we tend to overcomplicate it all the time. That
Yeah.
thought, like, "Oh, am I gonna regret doing it? No. Am I gonna regret not doing it? Yes."
Yeah.
But we overthink that way too much. It's just
Yeah.
strip it down to the basic.
Exactly. Sometimes it's just doing it. Just shut up and do it. Like I had a coach once just say, like, if you struggle with doing anything, just do it for 5 minutes. Make a commitment, start for 5, and if after 5 minutes you still want to stop, then stop. But
Mhm.
rarely have I ever experienced where I go and I start doing something for 5 minutes that I don't continue doing that thing.
Right.
It's just like getting people to go to a gym. Like I know now it's a little bit harder, but it's like if you know, make the effort to get to a gym. Like you got your clothes on, you got your shoes on, you drove to the gym, you now walk into the gym, dude, you're gonna do something. Like
You
you're
better.
there, you might as well.
Yeah.
And so it's reminding ourselves that it's like, oh, I'm not motivated to go to the gym. Well, just go to the gym. Okay, go
Mhm.
be unmotivated in the gym. you know,
Right.
it's pretty hard once you're there to not be motivated to do at least something.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and sometimes that's why they say just showing up, is half the battle right there. Like just getting there is great. It's a start. And so yeah, like anything, just start for 5 minutes. And if after 5 minutes you want to stop, stop. But most of the time we'll just keep going.
It's like when I would go dance at the bar, and they're like, I would just dance for 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, this feels good. I'm gonna keep dancing. I'm gonna
Yeah.
jump on stage at the bar and dance. And I'd come down, and my friends are like, what'd you do? Why'd you do that? I'm like, I don't know. It felt good though.
Oh, I love it, man. Well, it does, right? You get the endorphins pumping and the energy's flowing, and you just let go. Sometimes just letting go is all we need to do. We get so tight, right? Just with
Hmm.
with all these limitations, and then usually the only one that's ever holding us back from doing things is ourselves. So it's, I guess, just trusting that it's going to be okay. What's the big deal?
Yeah, definitely.
Uh,
So I've got two questions left, kind of, and these are the
sure.
two that I'm talking about all season, kind of like what I'm highlighting.
Yeah.
Um, so the first one I've got is, with the pandemic, there's been no surprise here at all. And
Mm.
sometimes when the media says it's a surprise, it really triggers me a little. But there's
Okay.
been multiple reports that mental illness cases that have been reported have increased,
Mm.
substance abuse has increased, domestic
Yeah.
abuse has increased. And a large portion of this can be linked tightly to things like job loss around the world, fear mongering in the media, like we've mentioned,
Mm.
personal loss, or even like growing uncertainty. So, how do we stop these numbers rising? Like, where do we go from here?
Wow. Well, that's a big, big ask, isn't it? Like that's for one, I think just creating the conversation and talking about it is a great place to start. And I
Mhm.
have to tip my hat at some media outlets. I've seen them start producing content talking about this. I think it was the National the other night had a segment about men's health, like specifically mental health, and they were talking about this as it related to the pandemic. And I thought, wow, what a great section. Like I was really impressed with CBC by producing that. And talking about some of the stats, talking about some men out there that are speaking openly about their struggles and mental health struggles, and especially over the last year. And
Mhm.
just by opening up the conversation, I think is one way to start to normalize the conversation, right? Because it's not a regular conversation that happens often. It's not seen as a positive nor a negative. It's sort of just sheltered away or pushed to the side. And I know, especially because I do a lot of stuff in the men's health space, and I've been co-facilitating men's groups for about 2.5 years now. And so the biggest thing that we tend to talk about, or at least what we're striving to talk about a lot more, make it more open. It's just this idea about men being okay to talk about some of the tough issues, you know, and I know as men we sometimes struggle with that, right? Just either based on how we were raised, the culture we were brought up in, how we've been role modeled by other men.
Mhm.
And so this idea of even vulnerability, well, what does that mean? Isn't that a weakness? Being vulnerable doesn't mean you're weak. Like that's not very masculine. Like even if you look up
Yeah.
what is masculinity, like some of the words that are synonymous with masculinity is like vigor, strength, right? Machismo. Like you
Yeah.
see these very strong and hard words. And so if masculinity, if you have to be masculine to be a man, that means I have to be these things too. And where does that create room for being vulnerable, being authentic, being open, and addressing some of my challenges or some of these negative thought patterns that I have? Like it doesn't really create a lot of space for that. And you know, I want to challenge that. I personally want to challenge it. I want to see us culturally challenge that. And,
Mhm.
and I think as we see more and more build the awareness culturally, just around mental health and the conversations around mental health, because a lot of times it's just something that we struggle with on our own, right? Like we believe that it's something that we shouldn't share with others.
Yeah.
And so step one, creating more awareness. Also trying to normalize the conversation and recognize we all struggle with it at some point in our lives. We all do. Every single person. I've never met someone that does not struggle with a mental health challenge at some point in their life. And sometimes, and we say it's chronic. Well, yeah, I've chronically dealt with anxiety and depression at multiple periods of my life. I do. Yeah. The other day, I swear I had an anxiety attack. I mean,
Mhm.
based on my memory, like, and if no one's had an anxiety attack, you maybe not relate to this, but my chest was constricted, found it hard to breathe. I was sweating, cold and hot sweats. Like it was just, I just felt very on edge,
Mhm.
and just like, stressed to the max, almost immobilizing me to want to do anything, and it was awful feeling. Awful. I've been there before, so I know what to do. And for me, I got outside, went for a walk, took in some fresh air, went and meditated in the park for 15 minutes. Like I did a couple things just to bring myself down because I got wound up. I got nervous about something, and it just took over.
Mhm.
And but it happened, and I dealt with it, and I was okay. You know, but I've also now had the experience of how to deal with that, and I've learned healthy ways that to deal with that. And I hope that we can increase the amount of resources out there and make accessible to everyone these types of services. And I think we're shifting that way. Like I really feel that we are.
Yeah.
Um, but it's scary to see some of the statistics. You see those numbers coming out. It's like, whoa! I had
Mhm.
no idea it was that many because it's often something that's done in silence.
Right.
We don't talk about it. you know so yeah, to answer your question, I think that's the first step, is just building the awareness and building the acceptance around it, not making it such a fringe issue. It's not a fringe issue. This is a core issue, and it
Yeah.
affects a lot of people, pretty much everyone at some extent, either directly or indirectly.
Mhm.
So, but yeah, I mean, those are just some of my own thoughts, and I'm doing my part to try to help and carry the conversation forward. Right, like just even you bringing up this question, and with all your interviews and conversations, you're doing your part too. And I think it's just letting people know that you're not alone. That's the one thing I've noticed in my men's groups. We meet every Monday. It's called Mentorship Mondays, so
Okay.
capital MEN.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah, and the conversation is often centered around that. It's just like, what's real for you right now, and we start with that, and we celebrate wins. It's nice to go to a place and know that men aren't judging you. Like
Mhm.
whether you're talking about something vulnerable or you're talking about a great win that you just experienced, we're just holding space to share that. And what happens is other guys then share something similar. And all of a sudden you realize, man, this thing that I've been struggling with, you're struggling with something very similar. Oh, and so are you. And holy crap, here I thought I was alone dealing
Yeah.
with all this challenges on my own. And it's not the case. But unless we open up and we share about these things, we don't know. We just don't know. And so I think as the conversation becomes more accepted and not judged or frowned upon, or people made to feel less than they are because of that, um, things won't shift, as a whole. So it's again one step at a time. But I'm optimistic, and I always am, and to probably a little bit biased that way. But that's sort of my thoughts on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when I first opened up about my struggles, I was so scared because, like, mainly because I was like, I no one's gonna get this. I was like, I am the only person. And whoever's watching this, I've said this a billion times, but like my thought was, I am the only person going through this right now, and no
Mhm.
one's gonna get it. And then you open up and you're like, wow, like so many people get it.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
like breaking that barrier of like that thought that you're alone in this. That's what's gonna push the conversation forward a lot more.
for sure. So true. And I'm very grateful to hear that you've been open about this, but also I just thank you. Like honestly, Harry, like thank you for creating the platform, but also for being vulnerable, putting yourself out there. Like it's a very brave and courageous thing to do, but it's also a wonderful way to role model to others that, this is, it's okay.
Hmm.
Like there's nothing wrong with it. And I think that's the concern. Like I even had conversations with people, and it's like they refer to themselves as being broken, like they need to be fixed. And I'm like, none of us are broken. Nobody needs fixing. Like we really don't. Like everyone is exactly as the way they are. Now there might be better ways of handling things and dealing with things and coping with things, but I don't believe anybody's broken. No one needs to be fixed. But it's opening up to the conversation period, and I just love that you're utilizing and creating a platform that makes this conversation much more acceptable, as well as builds people's awareness on it. So I just want to commend you for that. I think it's amazing.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, labeling as broken, like almost labeling yourself as broken almost demotivates you even more to
yeah,
get help.
yeah. What do we do with broken things a lot of the times?
You throw it out.
We do. We are a disposable culture, aren't we? Like we're so quick. Well, I'll just buy a replacement. It's like,
Hmm.
yeah, it needs to be replaced. It's broken. Forget it. Throw it out. So we have this sort of acceptance of the things are broken. You just get rid of it. And so to label yourself as broken, it's like, oh my gosh, ouch, ouch, right? Like, oh man, that is not a label I'd want, and I don't want to attach that to anybody. No one deserves that because I don't believe anybody's broken.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And then my last question here. Um, I've heard this a lot because a lot of people come, through DM, through text,
Yeah.
what have you, to me about like what they're stressed about, especially this year. And a
Mhm.
big one that I've continuously heard is, they have this stress or this anxiety that they haven't done anything significant during the pandemic. Uh,
Yeah.
and like if you rewind back to like the beginning of the pandemic, and this I've said this a lot too because this has really triggered me. Like, let's say a month into the pandemic, you would get like these posts on your social media, or you would see these videos recommended for you of like these like, I don't think they're life coaches. I don't know who they are. I'm not going to label them, but
Mhm.
they'd be like, now's your time to go kill it. Like, what are you going to do with your time? Now's your time to be productive. Like, go in for it. And some people just, with the pandemic, they needed a break. They needed it was traumatizing, whether you want to address it, like acknowledge that or not. We had like things taken away, and whether you can feel it or whether you can't feel it, like it had some degree of trauma for everyone. It was a little traumatic
Mhm.
for everybody because no one's ever been through this before.
Right. Right.
So what would you want people to hear, like people who may be feeling anxious or stressed about the fact that they've done nothing quote unquote significant during these last 8-9 months?
Well, I like to think that people, yeah, I mean, that's really judging oneself, but judgment often happens because we're comparing ourselves to others, right? Like
Mm,
it's like I like to say to people, like, are you happy? Like, are you happy right now? Like, because really, that's all that matters. Like, are you happy? Like, are you taking time for you to do the things that are good for you? To like, if there's something that you'd like to change, what is that? Could you do that one thing? And start to see a positive shift for yourself. And I sort of always start from that personal place, that like introspection, if you will, like just asking ourselves the right question. Well, am I happy right now? Okay, well, no, I'm not ultimately that happy. What's going on? What do I need to be happy? Like what can I do right now to shift myself into more of a happier state, more joyful state, to feel more fulfilled in life? Like maybe all you want right now is a pause. That's okay.
mhm,
But will that pause make you happy? Yeah, great. Then pause. Take this as an opportunity to just reset,
mhm,
get yourself back to a good place, get yourself healthy, get yourself well. Like that's the cool thing I think for a lot of people. It's like, well, you don't have all these extra hours to go to a job. I mean, well, what can you do with those hours? You want to watch TV? Okay, fair enough. Um, does that make you feel good? Okay. I think people just have to take stock. It's that personal introspection. I come back to that often because, it's easy for someone to say, well, you should go do this, you should do that. And I think people feel like they're being shit on all over the place, right? Like, it's
mhm.
like shoulda, woulda, coulda. And all these expectations. But whose expectations are there? Sorry, I think is my internet still okay there? Can you
Yep,
hear me?
yeah, you're still here.
I'm sorry. I thought maybe I froze it. I got the little message there from Zoom saying, oh, your internet connection. Um, so I guess it's just being okay with being okay. Do you know what I
Mhm,
mean? Like just that inventory of oneself and saying, well, what do I need right now to feel either safe, to feel happy, to feel loved? Like, what do I need right now? like right now, and just what do I need to do to create that? And I think that's a good place to begin, because if you're always basing your decisions and your actions off the opinions of others, it's really hard to thrive with that kind of a pressure.
Hmm.
Because you never really do anything for you. You're doing things because you believe they're expected of you,
Yeah.
without ever asking yourself, what do I want? So if I was going to ask anybody anything, it's like, well, just ask yourself, what do I want? What do I need right now? And never cut yourself short, because I believe everybody deserves to be happy. I truly believe that. I think we're all entitled to that. We're all entitled to be happy. And I'm not talking about money. Like, some people say money brings you happiness. Well, maybe. I don't necessarily believe that. Maybe it contributes to it. I mean, we need a certain sense of safety, roof over our head, food in our belly. Yeah, I get that. Those are things that cost money. So, yeah, sure, be fiduciary responsible. Okay. But beyond that, some of those basic necessities, like, what else is going to bring you happiness?
Hmm.
What are things that you want to do with your life? What kind of life do you want to be living? Like, I know they're big questions. They are. But now's the perfect time to ask them, because we do have the time, for the most part. We have this opportunity to have a little bit of a pause, to be introspective, to be reflective, to maybe start to ask ourselves some of these questions and give ourselves time to answer them. And then once we have an answer, well, then it's just like, okay, well, it's one thing I can do today that's going to bring me one step closer to doing that.
Hmm.
Maybe an education thing, right? Often it is. Like, I always say, there's three questions I like to ask if I'm going to start to encounter any type of change in my life. So as soon as I know there's something I want to change, these are three questions I ask. It's like, can I do this? Really simple. Can I do this? So, like, just an example. I want to lose 20 pounds. Okay. Well, can I lose 20 pounds? Hmm. Okay. Well, I know when I was morbidly obese, asking myself, can I do this? It was like, well, I know I can do this, but really my main concerns were around education. I don't really know how to do it.
Hmm.
So what did I do? I went to the library. I also started asking friends. I sought out the people that I believed knew how to do that stuff, and I asked for some help. You know, Find a community. The can I do this often requires education, maybe some support. So yeah, if you get a yes, oh yeah, I know I can do this. Great. You start to think about what you need to do to now start to facilitate that. So you get a good a yes, right? So can I do this? Yes, I can do this. Two, if I do this, will it work? Oh, okay. Well, so if I start to exercise, if I start to eat a little bit differently, will I start to see myself lose some weight?
Hmm.
Well, yeah. Yeah, it's a yes. I know if I do some of these things, I should start to see some changes. And fortunately for me and most people, when you start to ask yourself, if I do this, will it work? There's enough people out there that have probably already done it, that have achieved the results that we want. So it's like, okay, well, they've done it. Sure, I can do this too. You know, there's
Right.
probably a process there I can plug in or mimic in my own life. There's a play I can run that will provide me similar results. Maybe not identical results, but similar results. Great. So you've got yes and yes. Can I do this? Yes. If I do this, will it work? Yes. Now you got to ask question number three. Is it worth it? Right? Is it worth it? Is the change I want really worth the effort? And that's good. Like, if I'm talking to a team or I'm talking to an organization or a company, and I say, is it worth it to facilitate this change that you want in your organization? That makes sense to them in that environment. But when I'm talking to individuals like you and I are, so it's like, you have to ask yourself, look in the mirror and say, am I worth it? Am I worth the change?
Hmm.
That question's not so easy to answer now, is it? Because it involves us saying, yeah, I'm worth it. Damn right I'm worth it. And I believe everybody is worth it, the change, if it's really what you want. Um, because I know, especially when it comes to health and lifestyle and happiness, and you start thinking about those changes, if you were going to go to people that love you unconditionally, no matter what, and you ask them, hey, this is a change I want to do. This is why I want to do it. Do you think I'm worth it? What are they going to tell you?
Hell yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, and so, but it's getting to that point where you believe it for yourself.
Hmm.
And because once you get those three yeses, man, you're unstoppable. You will facilitate the change, and you can do it on your time. Don't worry about don't add all this pressure. Like, oh, I got to be there by tomorrow. No, no, no. Just embrace the process and just do a little bit every day. And it's amazing that little bit of every day compounds over time, and you'll see some shifts. I always joke about it, but this is so cliche now, but those big ocean liners, those cruise lines, they are massive. They're like cities on water, right?
Mhm.
When they want to turn around, it takes them a long time.
Right.
But they plot a course. If they are a half a degree off where the destination is, you give them 24 hours, they will be somewhere completely different.
Hmm.
But it's only a fraction of a degree off. 24 hours later, you're somewhere completely different. And that's how drastic small changes are in our lives. Same idea. But it happens and it compounds day after day after day. That little micro change, micro change, micro change. Like James Clear in his book Atomic Habits talks about this compounding effect of positive little things that we do every day, right? And so it's just recognizing what are the little things that are going to compound over time into big things. And I often joke with people, but I'll tell my clients, it's like, yeah, you like your wine every day, great. You have a couple glasses every night. Well, if you cut one of those glasses, you'll save yourself about 80 to 120 calories a day.
Hmm.
You do that for a whole year, you've probably shaved about 6 pounds off. That one little change, going from 2 drinks a night to 1 drink a night, you're probably going to save yourself gaining 6 pounds. One thing, one little tiny thing. I do it with other clients. I'm like, I want you to just take your sugars out of it. No more sugar in your coffee.
That's what I just did.
Huge.
Hmm.
That one little thing, you think about that over a year. It's massive. We're talking about pounds and pounds and pounds of sugar not
Hmm.
going into your system. So it's just these little tiny things. It's like talking about people taking the stairs. Oh, I've been taking the elevator at my building forever. Well, what if you started at the beginning of COVID and you just started taking the stairs instead of the elevator every day? Whoa. By the end of COVID, you've walked a lot of steps that you
Hmm.
wouldn't have walked otherwise. That's a big shift, but it was one small little activity that you changed. And so that's sort of what I'd like to leave people with on that question that you just asked. It's like, look at the little things, right? That create a great amount of change. And don't be afraid to ask those 3 questions. Every time you're encountering a new change or desire to make something different happen in your life, those are the 3 questions. Can I do this? If I do it, will it work? And am I worth it? Like simple enough, but it can be applied almost 100% of the time to any type of change.
Hmm. Awesome, man. Where can my viewers find you?
Well, I've got a website, daimanuel.com. That's DAIMANUEL.com. It's just my name, Dai Manuel. The cool thing is I've also got my name on all the social platforms. So Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Twitter, TikTok. Like it's just my name. So I'm really easy to find that way. And I always tell people, just message me. Say, hey, I heard you on Harry's podcast. How's it going? Like just say hello. And I'm a real dude. I'll have a conversation. I'll say something back. Like I was just telling people, let's just have a conversation. Reach out. If there's anything that resonated with them today, I'd love to hear it. Just reach out. And
Hmm.
I got loads of free resources on my website. So I always tell people it's a bit of a rabbit hole. And it was about 1,500 articles I've published over the last 14 years of writing for the site. And it's all geared to helping people live their best life. That's it. Nutrition, fitness, mindset, like it's all there. It's just basically, as I've been exploring my own life, I just keep documenting stuff. And so there's lots of stuff there. I always just say to people, like, enjoy it, hop in. You have any questions, let me know. And that's it. That's all.
It's not the worst rabbit hole to fall down.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And it's going through a full redesign, so don't judge me right now. But about 30 days from now, the new site will be live. It has way better infrastructure. It'll be easier to find stuff too. So I always tell people, go to the search bar, type in whatever topic you're interested in. Chances are there's an article or two on it. But the navigation will be way smoother next time people come back. So don't judge it. If you go to it before the end of January, don't judge me. Come back after the fact.
Love it, man. And with that, we are done our discussion for today. Once again, Dai, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate that.
Thank you, Harry. And man, keep up the great work. Super impressed by you, your platform, what you're doing. And this, thanks for creating a space to have these conversations. I think it's much needed, and it's wonderful to see someone leading the charge.
Oh, thank you, man. That means a lot. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to all my viewers, I will see you guys next time. Hey guys, thanks for watching another episode of my show. If you want more episodes of the H Panel, the button's going to be right here. If you want to subscribe for more videos from myself, it'll be right down below. Please like, comment, share, give 5 stars. Let's keep this conversation going, guys, all right? I'll see you next time. Thank you for your support.